Hello, I'm Bill Fox, and this program is about East Brunswick. A little over 11 years ago, early in the summer of 1977, I was summoned one Sunday afternoon to the control center for our water system, the so-called filter plant at the corner of Ruse Lane and Brunswick Avenue. When I arrived, I was informed that there was a major problem. We were rapidly losing pressure in our water system. Water was being taken from the system faster than it could be put in. The elevated water storage tanks, which serve to maintain pressure in the system and which normally contain 35 or 40 feet of water, were at 10 feet and quickly dropping further. If they reached 0 feet, there'd be no pressure in the water system. The major consequence of losing system pressure is that you also lose the ability to supply water to fight a major fire. So I immediately put in a call for the chiefs of the fire companies to join me at the filter plant. They came quickly, and they advised me to declare a water emergency, which I did. We sent police cars and fire trucks throughout the township, announcing over their loudspeakers that there was an emergency and that everyone should stop using water. This action slowed, but did not stop the loss of water from the storage tanks. Together, the chiefs and I, we watched the gauges for the water tanks as they showed less and less water remaining. We watched them pass the point at which we would no longer have a reserve to fight a major fire, and we discussed the measures to be taken should such a fire occur. We watched with great frustration and anxiety as the inevitable happened. The storage tanks were entirely empty. Then the phone calls began to come in to police headquarters and the emergency number at the filter plant. People were turning on their faucets and getting nothing coming out. Fully 1/3 of the township had no water pressure. Over the next few hours, the fire chiefs, the water production staff, and I sweated out the recovery of the system. The declared emergency reduced usage so that the storage tanks could be refilled and pressure restored. As the water level in the storage tanks rose, I felt as though a great weight had been lifted from me. Only a few of us really knew the true danger in those hours without adequate water pressure and without a fire reserve. It was not a feeling that I liked very much. Right then and there, I promised myself that neither I nor my fellow residents would be in a similar situation again. 11 years later, I can tell you that barring a catastrophic failure of some part of our system, East Brunswick will never be exposed to such a dangerous situation again. It's taken a lot of effort by a lot of people and a lot of your money to be able to say this. On this program, we'll be discussing our water system, who's responsible for it, and what the future holds for water in East Brunswick. Joining me are Ted Shelton, Vice Chairman of the Water Policy Advisory Committee. We'll hear more about that later. Lou Neely, Township Finance Director, who manages a water utility, and Jack Cunningham of the firm of Hazen and Sawyer, who are our water engineers. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good evening.
Lou, I'd like to start with you, and I'd like to ask you to explain how we operate our water function in East Brunswick.
Okay, Mayor, well, first of all, let me tell you that the water utility is no small operation. You said that it costs a lot of money. It's $4.5 million a year operation. That's a lot of water and a lot of revenue. But that water, or that revenue, comes from people who buy the water. If you don't tie into the system, you don't pay anything for the water protection. It's not a property tax levy. It's called a water utility, which means that the utility, those people who use the water, pay for the water.
How many people don't use the township water in East Brunswick?
There's about 2% of the people in town that still have wells.
Private wells.
Private wells.
Now, we've used the term utility a couple of times. And people often get confused about utilities and authorities and private businesses. How about explaining the difference for us?
Okay, there are basically 3 ways, or actually 4 ways, that one can run a water system. One is an investor-owned company, where a group of investors go out and put money in it, they own it, they operate it, and it's regulated by the Board of Public Utilities. Another way is for it to just be a municipal function, which would be part of a department, just like the police department, the public works department, the roads department, and that would be part of your tax base if the revenues were short. A third way is to create an authority where the governing body, the council and mayor, give up their right to control it, and they appoint independent commissioners who have the right to raise rates, to set and to borrow money, and to establish the functional capacity of the system. And the fourth way is a utility, where the utility is that those customers still pay for it, but the management board, or the people who are ultimately responsible, are the mayor and the municipal council. so that they're most responsive to the voters. We've selected the fourth way, the utility, which is a separate function of municipal government where the mayor and council serve as the board.
Doesn't that mix water rate money with tax money?
No, it does not, because the state law requires that when you have a utility that it be set up in a separate trust and that those accounts be separate, distinctly audited, maintained differently, and a separate budget is appropriated for the utility as opposed to the general municipal functions that fall under the property tax dollar.
So it's run like almost like a separate arm of municipal government.
It's run like an investor-owned company. The only thing that's taken out of it is that the investors, who are the owners of the community, don't receive stock dividends, and we don't charge to make a profit. We simply charge enough to operate the system at a zero-based profit.
You mentioned earlier that the water utility is about a $4.5 million a year operation. What does all that money go for?
Well, it's broken down into four categories. About $750,000 is for salaries. The employees who read the meters, who install meters, who run the filter plant, make sure that the lines are running, and repair, make new connections, and flush the hydrants, and take care of when a car hits a meter or hydrant or break. $2.1 million is used to purchase water, chemicals, and pump and electricity to bring the water to it. And $1.3 million is to pay debt service. To solve that problem you mentioned 11 years ago, major improvements have been resulted in the system so that there is a steady supply of water, and we're now paying for that, and we'll pay for that over the course of the next 15 years.
Okay, Ted, I'd like now to turn to the Water Policy Advisory Committee. It's a committee that I'm very impressed with. It probably is the most substantive and hardest working, one of the hardest working citizen groups in township government. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who, the number of people on the committee, what its functions are, and what kinds of things you're concerned about?
Okay, we like to think of ourselves as the watchdog for citizens' interests here in East Brunswick Township, and each of us brings a different focus to the Water Policy Advisory Committee. My own personal interest is water quality, both from a professional standpoint and as a member of the committee. We look at the budget of the township. Lou mentioned that the budgets are separate. We keep a careful guard and make sure that they remain separate. We don't want other people in municipal government to put a secretary, for an example, on the water utility budget and have them work for another agency within municipal government. So we go through the budgets. There's a couple of members who have budget expertise, and they go through the budget and make sure that the monies are being spent as they should be. We review the water testing results for the utility. The state mandates that the water utility be tested for various chemicals at different intervals, and we look at those water quality tests and make sure that they're meeting the requirements both of the New Jersey Safe Drinking Water Act and the secondary regulations of the federal Safe Drinking Water Act.
You mentioned you have a professional interest in water quality. I know you're at Rutgers.
I'm on
what's
the
your field
extension faculty at Rutgers, and my area of expertise is water resources. So I have both a professional and citizen interest in being on the Water Policy Advisory Committee.
And if memory serves me correctly, you also are a charter member of that committee.
Yeah, I don't like to think back that far, but yeah, I guess I am.
Jack, tell me a little bit about Hazen and Sawyer.
We're a consulting engineering firm located in New York City. We've been in business for about 40 years, and we have been working with the town for about 25 years. We did the original study. I am told, I was not involved with the firm at the time, that recommended going to New Brunswick, bringing a water line down Ryder's Lane, putting the pump station at Tice's Lane, just east of Ryder's Lane, bringing the water line across to Route 18 and then south, and that was the major source of supply to augment in the earlier days, which was the water strictly from the treatment plant, which was at Ruse Lane and New Brunswick Avenue. Since then, we have been involved in putting in large tanks, large pipelines, improving the pumping facilities, adding chemical additions, working very closely with your people on the operation of the facilities, and being available when needed for any water activities.
Now, the township has an engineering staff and some pretty competent people. What is it that Hazen and Sawyer brings to a municipality that we couldn't get on our own?
Well, we specialize strictly in water and wastewater. And those people in our firm that are working with you are basically working day in and day out in the field of water, as am I.
And do you have any special facilities to support that work?
We have laboratories and we have computer programs established strictly for water projects. We're doing some work right now, a water hammer analysis to determine what would happen if we have a power failure when we're pumping water from Middlesex Water Company, or if Middlesex Water Company had a power failure when we're taking water from them, to see what effect it could have in the lines.
Now, a water hammer sounds like an oxymoron. What is a water hammer?
Water hammer is what happens if you shut off a valve too quickly and you hit the bang, you hear the bang. You've had it in your home if somebody turns a shower off too quickly. That's water hammer.
Okay, except we're talking about something on a much larger scale.
We're talking about pipelines 36-inch, 24-inch in diameter, which have water flowing through them at maybe 5, 6, 7 feet per second, and flows of upwards to 20 million gallons a day, which is something like 14,000 gallons a minute.
Now, one of the things that we did right after 1977 was develop a water master plan with Hazen and Sawyer's help. I can't help but recall that while you had been our consultant since 1963, much of what was in that first water master plan were recommendations that had been made since 1963 over the years that had not been implemented. But Lou, tell me what we've done in the way of upgrading our system based on that 1978 master plan.
Well, Mayor, I'm pleased to, I'd like to put this into 3 building blocks if I can. Okay. First of all, when the utility was first started and their very first debt was issued in 1951, and the governing body at that time thought that when they put a well in, it was going to last forever, and they sold bonds for 40 years. So we're still paying for that very first well
today
that was put in 1951, and we're going to pay for it until 1991. That's an awfully expensive well because we've replaced it 3 times. As a matter of fact, we don't even use those wells now. And so they financed well beyond the useful life of it. So one of the first things we did when we went back and looked at what Hazen and Sawyer had been recommending, the Water Master Plan, we said, let's get on a current basis, pay for the things as we need them, and finance with reasonable schedules. So that's why the debt service is $1.4 million today, because we are paying for things in the useful life, not in the maximum what the law permits. Secondly, we looked at rates, and we said that people hate to be hit with a rate every year and every year and every year. So we looked at rates and said, where can we go, and how can we have a stabilized rate based upon projected growth, meeting people's needs over time? And I'm pleased to say that we're into the 5th year without having raised water rates, and we're currently into that, and it looks like we're going to go 1 or 2 more years because we established a sound financing principle. And third, we looked at that and said that for about 5 or 6 days a year, and maybe up to 10 days, there's a need for this tremendous water supply. 4th of July, Memorial Day, sometimes Labor Day. It depends on really dry days. But the rest of the time, the demand is way down. Why not put in a conservation system that will allow us to save capital expenditures and just let people learn to live with every other day all the water they want, but take it on either an odd day or an even day? And those 3 steps, paying, having a reasonable scheme to raise rates, and to have conservation, have resulted in a system that anybody who wants to take the water, they can take all the water they want. If they're an odd number house, all the water you want is available on any given day of the year.
I want to come back to the system in a minute, but Ted, this issue of conservation is one that I know you personally and the policy committee support quite strongly.
I'm very happy to see that Lou is a water conservation convert. We might not have said that about 12 years ago when we first started out.
But
in the
I get a
program.
lot of questions, and council members and others get a lot of questions. You know, why are we under water restrictions? Or if you saw my letter to one of the newspapers a couple of weeks ago, I said it really upsets me to see East Brunswick listed among the towns that have put in restrictions as though they had some emergency when we've done that deliberately.
Yeah, actually East Brunswick is very progressive in having this odd-even watering schedule, and if everybody recognizes the reason for it, I think that they would cooperate more. It's actually saving tax dollars by having an odd-even system. We don't need as many water towers around town. We save capital costs in building this extra reservoir capacity, and it really saves all of us money by adhering to this odd-even.
But I want to water when I want to water.
I know, but it's something you can get used to fairly easily. You can set your, if you're fortunate enough to have an underground sprinkler system, you can very easily set that to an odd-even pattern. I know everybody comes home on a Friday night and they want to water their lawn, and they're unhappy with that kind of a restriction, but it's to our best interest to adhere to that particular policy because of the sizing of the pipes, the water towers, and the capital costs for increased pump capacity, etc.
So by having these conservation measures, we've reduced the amount of capital expenditure that we've had to make on our system.
I think Lou has some figures where we showed that we did indeed dampen the peaks that occur because of the odd even restrictions that we do have.
But back to your question, Mary, you say you want to water. If you put a new lawn in, or if you plant new shrubberies and you're beautifying your house, we give permits so that people can water every day during that new time. But once a plant's established or a lawn's established, if they water it every other day, it's not going to die. And by putting all the water they want on it on every other day, every second day, it lasts well. And if you're putting a brand new lawn in, or if you're doing something that is results, we give permits so you can do that. And the system is designed to handle that. For the people who want a landscape or something that occurs, they can water every day during that period. But then once it becomes established, the every other day works out. And what this has done is in 1986, we had the highest average monthly demand that we've had. And even with all this drought or dry weather we had in 1988, people have not used on an average what they used back in 1986 because the odd-even has leveled that out. And that's part of this overall increase. We haven't had to put in bigger lines. We haven't had to put in new tanks. We haven't had to put in humongous pumps that are only going to be used 5 or 6 days a year. We've been able to meet everyone's needs at a reasonable cost.
You know, the town, Mr. Mayor, was foremost in putting in requirements that they put in conservancy in flow through showers, toilet bowls, anything that used water to restrict or reduce the amount of usage.
That was even before the state mandated water conservation, water closets, and before it mandated flow restrictors and water-saving shower heads. Now it's statewide, and any new construction or reconstruction must have the water-saving toilet, the flow water-saving shower head, and the faucet aerator that restricts flow to 2.75 gallons per minute.
You know, you talked about the 1977 master plan. You are aware that in 1987 we updated the master plan, and we found that we have steadily decreased the ratio of the maximum day to the average day, which means that the peaks are reducing, or the spread between the average day and the max day is lessened, which indicates that it's working.
You know, we could just as well forget this odd-even and let the ordinance die, but the water utility has an aggressive newspaper advertising program. I'm sure you've seen the ads that are running in the local newspaper to remind the public that we do have this regulation, and I'm very happy to see that.
What if we did away with it? Could our system take it today? Jack?
I would prefer not to try it. I wouldn't want you to have that afternoon or evening that you referred to in 1977 again. There are times when the system, even with odd even, is stressed. But I would say that the system possibly could, but I mean, we have situations where we have power failures. We have situations where maximum drafts are put on the system. I think last year on Memorial Day weekend was the largest usage in the entire year, 87, where people were filling pools and doing things of that nature that really stressed the system. And without odd even, I don't think the system as it currently exists would be able to provide the safety that the town wishes.
Everybody would fill their pool on Memorial Day weekend, and they'd all turn the spouts on at once. And, that's not what we want to achieve.
You know, it's an interesting thing, if I just may mention
Sure.
this. I was involved with a startup of a water treatment plant when Roots, the show Roots came on the air. And you would go out to the treatment plant in the morning, and you could see the peaks of usage of water that occurred exactly when the commercials came on. And I mean, this is something that was very evident. It was amazing. I mean, I was flabbergasted when I saw that, and you could actually see that the United States was watching Roots, and you could see when the commercials came. So this is an indication that people do use water at specific hours or specific occasions.
You get those same patterns at the sewage treatment plant as well. Everybody uses all the water in the morning, and the peak hits the sewage treatment plant around 9 or 10 in the
Well,
morning.
that's all interesting, but Ted, I'd like to also talk about rates for a minute. I know one of the things we did early on in this program was change our rate structure so that volume users would be paying a higher fee.
Again, East Brunswick is very progressive. If you look at the rate structures in other towns in New Jersey, you don't have what they call an increasing block rate, where the more water you use above a certain level, the higher cost per 1,000 gallons.
Now, what did that do when we changed the rate structure?
Well, we were actually the first one in the nation to do that. Washington system in Washington, D.C. got a lot of credit because they're a much larger system. But what that did is we looked at the base load as to what people need for water. And talking about this, with school starting today, you could see that between 6 o'clock in the morning and 8 o'clock, how many kids were going to school and how many people were brushing their teeth and what's happened, the demand just early time. So we looked at the base load and said, this is how much a person needs, and a family of 4 was our assumption. We said, this is the cost for that family to have their water. If someone wants to then use more than that because they have extra facilities or extra, then there's a next block. And if they want to water outside and wash cars and fill pools, there's the next block and the next block. So that meant that the people who are causing us to have to put more elevated tanks in, larger size lines, bigger pumps to meet those peaks are paying a higher price for those peaks. And that's the utilitarian concept. You talked about what's a utility. The people who cause the problem are paying the highest price to have that convenience. And that's part of our rate structure, so that the more one uses, the higher the incremental rate, as opposed to declining rate with volume.
The only place that falls down is when you have 8 or 10 or 12 people in an individual single family.
You're correct. If there are a number of children in a family, and the base then really doesn't apply.
Now, this rate structure applies to businesses and industries as well. What happened when we introduced the rate there?
Well, we had some people seeing that their water bills changed dramatically, but they built in, and we had apartment owners come to us and say, hey, we would like to start a conservation program. And we had the largest industry in town come to us and said, we're going to expand, and with the expansion we need to conserve water because we think we're wasting a lot. And they actually cut their water demand by 40%. We're able to add a whole new production line and still not use the amount of water that they were prior to conservation. Another industry in town was using almost 10 million gallons a month, and by recycling and doing some chilling with their water, they were able to cut that demand down to about 2 million gallons a month, so that we didn't waste that resource. And that sizing of the lines and those pumps were available for some of the homeowners that were coming on stream.
Some communities like Perth Amboy have a declining block rate, where they have refineries that use hundreds of millions of gallons of water in a year, and they're encouraging that industry to use that amount of water to keep their system solvent, so to speak. They want that industry to remain in town, so they cut the rate for very, very large users.
But there's no economic incentive to conserve or
And there's no incentive for these industries at all to conserve.
And it's my understanding that what happened here, both with homeowners and industry, was just going around and checking for leaks and tightening up faucets and so on brought about a dramatic savings for many people.
Right. The State Division of Water Resources cites the industries in East Brunswick as examples of what can be done if the industries put their mind to it.
The Army Corps of Engineers used East Brunswick as one of 4 samples in a guidebook that they published, I think it was 5 years ago. They didn't cite East Brunswick, just used an East Coast town. But we were cited as a model, and our system was used in that, and is still published by the Army Corps as on conservation and water operation.
Now, we've just been through the summer, and what was our experience, Jack? Did we have any problems?
To my knowledge, we have not had any problems this summer. There was one day when Middlesex Water Company's treatment plant lost power, and our flow was reduced for about 6 or 8 hours to half or a third of what it would have been, which allowed our tanks to drop below a normal level. But other than that, everything seems to be in good shape. We are looking at expanding the Tice's Lane pumping station. You're aware that Riders Lane is to be reconstructed by the county within the next year, and there's going to be a replacement of the existing 25-year-old 30-inch main with a new 36-inch main coming down Riders Lane.
Could I interject here? One of the things the Water Policy Committee was concerned with was that new construction. You know, that's the only water line that's coming into town, and if somebody were to make a mistake while they're constructing the new Riders Lane, we wanted a contingency plan in case that line was breached, and if the utility has responded, then we're all set.
I think the governing body is the one who really responded, because when the Water Policy Advisory Committee came to him and said, here's the problem, and if this, would you appropriate the funds or allow the utility to borrow those funds and have it available? And you, leading that with the council, passed that ordinance, and so we have a contract with the county that when they start construction on that road, the first thing they're going to do is build a new parallel line, which we're going to pay for, before they even touch or drive over top of the old line, so that there's no risk and the town won't be at fire danger, or we won't be without water.
Good. Now, I want to go to those future things in a little more detail in a few minutes, but I'd still like to back up and ask what physically has changed about our system since 1977 that allows us this year to be trouble-free.
Okay.
What have been the major improvements to the system?
Well, the major improvement was that the water policy knew that New Brunswick could not supply all of the water that was needed based upon the growth rate this town was experiencing. They looked at Elizabethtown, Middlesex Water Company, building their own treatment plant, running a line to the canal or to Spruce Run Round Valley Reservoir System, and after an extensive period of time, determined to tie in a long-term contract with Middlesex Water Company, which is an investor-owned company, to treat and pump our water. And so we bought a diversion privilege from the Spruce Run Round Valley Reservoir up in Hunterdon County, and we have a guaranteed contract for 25 years, and we control the water rights to that, and that water flows down. Middlesex treats it and pumps it and produces it to our system through a 36-inch line. That crosses the Raritan River and comes in Riders Lane. That is the major system, and what that's done is given us consistency of water. We no longer use well water or groundwater and mix it with the surface water.
I want to come back to that too, but this pipeline from Middlesex, now Middlesex is in Edison, and that pipeline comes from their plant in Edison all the way across over. Now, we own that plant, that pipeline?
That's right. We own that pipeline, every bit of it, and that was part of the ongoing debt service for the utility. Now, that is turning out to be one of the most valuable resources, because the state, at the same time we were building that pipeline, studied the groundwater systems in Middlesex, Monmouth County, and determined that they were at risk because they were overpumped, and there was a great deal of pollution entering from salt water and from other chemicals. And so they ordered every community in this area to cut back on their groundwater reliance by 50%. Had that pipeline not been installed, East Brunswick would have had restrictions and would have had severe problems. But because of the forethought, that line is in place, and we've not had near the problems other communities are experiencing, nor the expense, because it was made during a time when the capital market was a very good time to approach it.
Ted, I know that you and the whole committee were very much involved in the selection of a supplier for our water. What sorts of things led us to choose Middlesex?
Well, we visited their plants, and we felt that they had the most modern plant. They had the best laboratory facilities, they had the best treatment facilities, and the management seemed to be better than the other choices that we looked at.
Now, on the quality issue, I know there are, and sometimes I get distressed at this, but there are many people, in fact, there are whole neighborhoods in East Brunswick where people are buying bottled water because they think somehow it's not okay to drink the township water.
Yeah,
What's
I think
the
all
story
of us,
on that?
Yeah, all of us on the Water Policy Committee are somewhat disappointed with the way the phase-in procedure. None of us anticipated that there would be any taste and odor problems. Middlesex uses a different kind of a corrosion inhibiting agent. You must add something to the water to prevent corrosion of the pipes, to prevent corrosion of all your plumbing fixtures. And apparently there's an incompatibility between the corrosion inhibitor that New Brunswick was using and the one that Middlesex Water Company is using. And that was the reason for the taste and odor problem that we had when we first phased it in, and there's still some areas with, including my own home, with continuing taste and odor problems. It has nothing to do with the safety of the water. It's just a fact of life because of the corrosion inhibitors.
Now, you monitor, as part of the committee, you monitor the test of the water and all of the results of that. Are you convinced that that we do adequate testing, and are you satisfied that the results show that the water is safe?
The water is safe from the standpoint that it meets all of the parameters of the New Jersey Safe Drinking Water Act. There may be other things in the water that we presently can't test for, and this is the risk with drinking any water anywhere in the United States, even bottled water. There is no one who can say absolutely that there's no exotic organic chemical in the water. Each year, American industry produces millions of different organic chemicals, and each of these have the potential to enter the surface water, and we don't test for all of these chemicals. But New Jersey has a Safe Drinking Water Act that's testing for 20 additional chemicals. These are 20 more chemicals than any other state in the United States.
Now, we have typically tested beyond the requirements of the statute. Is that right, Lou?
That's correct. When the federal government established their Safe Water Drinking Act, we had hired a consultant who was working with the federal government and said, what other chemicals or derivatives are you looking at? And they required us to test once every 3 years and to report it to the public. The Citizens Committee said, let's test 3 times a year and then make those files on file at the library. So we test 3 times a year, and we test not only for the ones that are required by the federal government, the ones required by the state, but we test beyond that, and every time there's something that's read by one of the technical journals, as Ted is an environmentalist or someone else, they'll come and say, is there a testing method, can we test for this? So we're constantly looking to see ahead of what's required to make sure that the public's safe. But as Ted said, we test well beyond that. All of ours are well within the safety limits, and many of the things that these are exotic chemicals or the exotic production, there's no test for them. As soon as there's one available, we'll look at it and test for it.
So if someone wanted to see the results of all this water testing, they go to the library.
The Reference Desk Library has 5 years of water testing on board. I think we're the only town in the state, matter of fact, maybe the only one in the country, that puts that on file at a public place where someone can come to the reference desk, look at the test results, and take it to any laboratory in the country and say, here's what my water is like, what's that mean to you? And they can have a professional any place in the world look at it. And I think that we're the only town that does that, as far as I know.
We can't remove 100% of the risk, though. There's always going to be some risk. There's risk in walking across the street, and there's risk in driving your car. And there is risk in the food that you eat, and unfortunately, there's some risk in the water you drink.
Any water.
Any water.
You mentioned that we're going to be getting off of our well water completely. Does that increase or decrease the risk as far as our water supply is concerned?
In what respect? From a quality standpoint or a safety standpoint as far as volume and availability?
Well, both or
All right.
either one.
We are off the well systems. The two wells have been abandoned, or whatever you want to call it. The quality that is coming from Middlesex is better in that we had to treat the well water for iron and manganese. It was a harder water. We are now dependent strictly on the pipeline going to Middlesex as opposed to having water availability here in town. But I think that the quality standpoint and the availability, because we were only drawing about 2 million gallons a day out of the ground, that was the maximum of the pumps. And now we're talking about, by the year 2000, needing somewhere around 15 million gallons on a maximum day. This is a pittance when you really look at it. The major source is coming from the north, and now it's Middlesex Water Company.
Let me see if I can add a little bit to that. The water that was coming out of the Farrington Aquifer is an aggressive water, as we refer to it, because it had a low pH, which meant that it was not neutralized, and it would cause corrosion or systems to rust rapidly or to be pitted if we didn't put an inhibitor in that. And so we had to put a different inhibitor in because of that water. Now, by buying all of the water from one supply, the Spruce Run Round Valley system through Middlesex Water Company, there's no need to have two types of inhibitors, which was the taste and odor problem that occurred, where they were using one and we were using another inhibitor for a higher aggressive water. Secondly, Middlesex Water Company will go up and test 3 days the flow of water 3 days in advance, 2 days in advance, 1 day in advance, so that they try to have consistent water, and they treat it so that every time the water comes out of the plant, it's the same consistency with regards to pH and regards to all the other elements that one would measure in water quality. Now, once this system is thoroughly run into it and the new inhibitor has lined all of the pipes, people will have consistent water day in and day out, and I think the quality will be much higher because of that. They won't have the high iron. And if people have lived in town long, they remember back 11 years ago that sometimes when someone would hit a hydrant or there'd be a problem, they'd get these rust spots on their clothes, and they were washing white shirts or white laundry or towels or something, they'd have these rust spots in it. We're eliminating a lot of that through this new system and this new water supply, and that will eventually go away almost completely.
When the wells were in use, you had a situation that the well water and let's say the water from the north, whether it was from the city of New Brunswick or from Middlesex Water Company, was in the system. And a person at point A could have the water continually changing as the demand increased or decreased. 1 hour they would be getting well water, the next hour they could be getting water from Middlesex, so there was no continuity in some areas of town.
I could comment also on the organic chemical aspect. We used to think that groundwater was safe from organic chemicals. You had all that soil filtering the water, and no chemicals could reach the groundwater. But recent studies have shown that in actual fact there are more volatile organics found in groundwater than there are in surface water, because surface water, the chemicals can volatilize and go off into the atmosphere, and they're not found in surface waters, whereas they are found in groundwaters.
Now, even back in 1977, what I was told and what I think most people believe was that the problem we had was not a supply problem. There was plenty of water available outside of East Brunswick, and even at East Brunswick's border, but we could not get it through the system fast enough. I think, Lou, one day you, or maybe it was Mike Opaleski, described it to me as though, you know, if you had a long pipe that you were trying to put water through, but it had a lot of holes in it, like a bucket or a sieve, that's really what you're trying to do when you're trying to put water through a system and there are pipes coming off and people turning on faucets. It's like a pipe with holes in it. What have we done in the last 10 years to improve the distribution portion of our water system?
Well, the word redundancy is what we're looking at. When you're trying to push water down through a line that there are hundreds and thousands of homes tied into, and they're taking water off and you're trying to push it, it becomes very difficult. So what we've done is run parallel lines. There are major transmission lines that are designed just to move water from one point in town to another point in town, so we can fill the tanks, and the tanks then can go out to all of the various homes that need the water. That's the primary thing that we've done. You say there is water available. The Spruce Run Round Valley Reservoir Complex, which I talked about, has a safe yield of 225 million gallons of water a day over a 7-year drought cycle. So for 7 years, you could take 225 million gallons a day out of that system, day in and day out, and it would never go dry. But they're only under contract for 155 million. So there's still 70 million gallons of water that's available to buy if we need it. So we have plenty of water. The next question is how to get it here with the pipelines. And part of this master plan that Jack referred to is to build additional redundancy into the system, and additional supply.
Yes, we're talking about a new 30-inch line that will go from Tice's Lane down to the intersection of Summerhill and Ruse that will provide a parallel main to the 24-inch line that was built in 1964-65 that now goes across Tice's and comes down and splits to a 20-inch main that's in Cranberry and a 20-inch main that's coming down Summerhill. So the new line will provide additional redundancy in getting the water from the northern end of the town to the, let's say, the northwestern end of the town to the southeastern end of town.
Now, I know water people talk about looping systems,
Yep.
and why, and that seems to be very important. What does looping do, and are these improvements you're talking about, do they contribute to that?
As far as the transmission of water through town, we are going to be looping, because at Summerhill and at Cranberry, the new 30-inch water line will be connected to the existing 20-inch water lines. And what this permits is, if there is a demand here, at this, let's say on the eastern edge of town, you can now supply water from the north and also bring it in from the south. So you have access to any given point in town from 2 or more directions. This is what the looping provides. If you have a single pipeline extending out and you have a service at the end of that, it can only get water from one location.
But that has not occurred. So for the last 10 years, as everyone's come in for the planning board to develop, all the developers, we have made sure that they connect to 2 independent supplies, so that if someone hits a fire hydrant on Cranberry Road and we have to shut that system down, that the people who live in the community off that can have water coming in from a second source or looped in. So that, and in 1977, one of the first things we did, we looked and saw where there were dead ends all throughout town, where developers had run a line up and put a dead end on it, and a few hundred feet or 1,000 feet away there was another line. We've connected many of those with 8-inch lines or 10-inch lines so that there's reverse flow. So if something happens, a break, a hydrant's hit, or if there's demand and there's a heavy use in this section of the community, that it can flow in from another section so that people have consistent pressure and consistent water flow and fire safety. So that the most expensive thing most people buy is their house, and if we don't provide good fire flow to that by looping the system so it can flow both ways, then they really are at risk. And that's one of the things we've taken care of in the last 10 years. We have connected all of those loose ends so that there's not any truncated lines out there. That also adds to quality.
Now, Jack, East Brunswick is 22 square miles, and it's a, and I don't know how many miles of pipe we have, but it's a fairly sizable system. How do you know where you might need another transmission line or where you might need a storage facility?
We did hydraulic modeling of the system, in which we made a matrix of the distribution system using all water mains 8 inches and larger, and prepared this grid. And then we used water assignments at each of these intersections where pipes joined, and ran computer programs, or computer modeled, and looked at various combinations and permutations of demand on the system.
Now these are mathematical models.
These are mathematical models. And then we have gone out in the system and double-checked by putting in certain demands at certain points and checking to see if the pressures in the system respond as the models say they should.
It's not just a pure science, though, that you run a mathematical model. What we did is we provided them data. After they had designed the grid and said this is going to be one section, this is going to be another section, we took all the accounts and we gave them actual water demand, so that the homeowners who live in those areas, we gave them history of their use in aggregate. So when the computer model ran, it wasn't running on a guess, I guess this amount, I guess that amount. It was run based upon actual data over the course of 2 years' demand by the people who live in that area. And we assumed that where there was vacant land, we talked to the planning department and said, what is the zoning permitted here? What is the density that's going to allow this? And what is the current number of occupancy in a household? So that only in those areas where there was no homes were the items plugged in. The rest of it was based upon actual data. Is that right, Jack?
Yes, the year 2000, which is the cutoff date that we used, has the town built out. All major developable land. We're not talking about a lot here and a lot there, but all major developable land will be completely built by that date, and we assigned density per acre or per square mile, depending on what the planning department gave us, and we used water demands, and we were able to allocate on a peak hour, max day, and average day basis usage in the entire town.
Now, we haven't done everything that was in the 1978 master plan, as I understand it, and I gather that's because the population projections that were made at that time were higher than what we've actually experienced.
This is correct. But the only thing that we haven't done is put in some larger lines. The 87 master plan is well underway. We are following it. We have certain items that are required by the year 1990, 1995, and the year 2000. And I would say that we're right on track. The next major thing is the crosstown main, and that we're looking at sometime in the not too distant future for being online around early 1990s.
Now, Lou, I know some people have said to me, have remarked to me that they've read in the paper that we're going to be selling water. And how can we do that? And of course, they usually relate it to our odd-even restrictions that we talked about earlier in the program. But we are going to be selling water, is that correct?
That's correct. We're selling two sources of water, Mayor. One is that when we stopped using our wells, we didn't give up our permit to those well rights. And so we're not using it, and we're selling the well right permits. And to the borough of Englishtown is a good example. They need additional water. They can't get water unless they buy our well rights. And so we're offering them 100,000 gallons a day to take it out of the ground, and for $1 million they'll pay us, and that's a 30-year upfront payment.
It's not $1 million a day.
It's not $1 million a day. It's a one-time payment and they'll have 100,000 gallons a day for 30 years to take out of the ground someplace else. And that's water we weren't going to be using. Secondly, as I indicated, the Spruce Run Round Valley Reservoir has 70 million gallons a day of water available. If our pipeline's big enough to put additional water in it, if we put additional water in it and then we sell to them, it just flows through our pipeline. But the key ratio that Jack talked about, the base ratio compared to the max day, it's 4th of July, and everybody gets up to take a shower and have a picnic, and they start filling the pool, and they turn the sprinklers on, and the kids are and they're washing the car, and everybody in town, 43,000 people turn on their spigots all at once. That's the max day. That's when the water demand is the greatest. We have structured our contracts so that people who are buying water from us don't use water during those max days. They're going to use water during the wintertime when we don't have much outside use, and they're going to use the higher amounts in the period from October through April. And then, so the lines are designed for that. We already have the flow. We're paying for that water anyhow to protect it when we have it, need it during May to September. And so we're selling water during our off-peak period. It's like selling your inventory when you don't have a demand for it, and because we have to buy the water to guarantee it.
So who's going to buy the water from us?
Well, the borough of Spotswood is going to buy some water from us, And the industry known as Kimberly-Clark over in Spotswood was cut back so that they had to cut their groundwater use by 50%. They needed to buy water from us. South River has talked to us, and they have to cut back, and so they may be looking at it. And there are a couple industries that also, Anheuser-Busch is one that may have a need to buy some water as they, if they change their process down here. And then over in Monmouth County, there's a couple industries that want to expand, and they can't get any water. And we have some well rights left. Water that we're not using, it's just like in the bank. And so, and we don't sell the well rights to them, we only license them. So that in 30 years, when the Borough of Englishtown wants to continue taking water, they're going to have to pay us again. Because we're only giving them a license to take it for a fixed period of time. And so those are some of the areas that we're looking at, and that's part of what we're going to call a rate stabilization fund to maintain consistent rates and to allow for the capital improvements.
Now, it takes a long time to improve a system, Jack. And I look at towns around us who are just now beginning to deal with the issue of their own water systems. What's the average time for a major project like say the connection to Middlesex Water Company? How long does that take from the time you decide you're going to do it to when the construction is finished, on the average?
Well, I can answer exactly Middlesex because in March of '84 I was told that that was going to be my next design project. We bid it in September and construction started in, I think, November of '84, and the project was online in January of '86. So
That's not normal, though, is it?
no, things were moving pretty quickly that time. We all had our seatbelts fastened, but no, there are times when, well, as an example, the water mains that are just being laid right now on New Brunswick Avenue, we just completed that. Water lines are going to be going across through Frost Woods. It took us about 4 or 5 months to design that. Right now, we're still doing some finalizing of some easements and rights-of-way. The construction probably on that project will take about 6 months. A major water filtration plant could take 1.5 years, and this is not applicable here, but could take maybe 1.5 years to design and get all permitting requirements completed, and another 1.5 to 2 years for construction. So some of these projects take a long time from inception, design, to completion.
So you really do have to have a plan that you stick with and follow for a long period of time to be able to accomplish
Well,
this.
if we don't start something in late '88, we won't have it online before 1990. So you can usually figure that no matter whatever the project is, you're going to look at a total of 1 year from the time that the consultant is told to start the design until water is flowing through into or on that structure.
Well, a good example of this is the county rebuilding Riders Lane from Route 1 to Tisus Lane. In 1985, we signed an agreement with the county on this, and we worked out the fine points of that, and that took maybe 4 or 5 months. They are just now going out to bid. So it was 1985, September of '85, we signed the agreement. All of it's designed and the process is worked through. They're just now going out to bid. It will take them 17 months to build the bridge over Weston Mills, which is going to have the superstructure to hold our water line. So if they were to bid that and award it in October and hopefully get started in April, 17 months from then, you're talking about 4 years or more just for that major transmission line to come through from when you say, yes, we're going to go forward, and we put the governing body says you may go forward until we get all of the approvals and the Army Corps and the state DEP permits. It's a long process, so you need a plan, and you need to be committed to plans.
Well, this is an ongoing process, and Ted, I want to ask you, it's kind of a final question. What's on the mind of the Water Policy Advisory Committee in terms of what's concerning the committee, and what kinds of issues do you see coming up in the future?
Well, in terms of the new construction, one thing, and sale of water, one thing that we're concerned with right now is whether Middlesex Water Company, the company that we're purchasing water from, has enough excess capacity to supply these towns. Can we sell water to Spotswood, to South River, and not interfere with the quality of the water that we're receiving? right now. So we've asked Lou to explore with Middlesex Water Company what their construction schedule is, and Lou relates that they're about to begin expansion of their facility in Edison. Is that correct?
That's correct. They've done two things. They built what is called a dry well, where they just hold water. It holds 10 million gallons a day, exclusively to meet East Brunswick's needs, so that when we have peak demands or calls, so that's going to be pumped to us. They've also completed financing in the first part of August to double the size of their plant, and they're in the process of actually designing that now. We're having input into what our future needs are going to be based upon the master plan and based upon contract sales, so that they will be able to meet that. Now we're planning with them, and that's going to be over the course of the next 12 months, is that planning process with them before they start constructing.
But will our quality suffer in that interim? That's the real question that we want to
And the answer is
answer.
no, it will not, because of that dry well. I mean, that 10 million gallon well.
So
Time will
that's one concern.
The
what are
other,
some others?
recently everyone got a letter about the lead in their drinking water, and one of the things that we asked was that the schools be notified immediately. As soon as we found out about the EPA study, they had found that there's lead, believe it or not, in drinking water fountains. The water fountains, in some instances, the manufacturers of water coolers had either used lead in the storage facility in the water cooler, or else there were a lot of lead joints in these coolers, and they found that the lead limit was exceeded if the cooler was allowed to stand for several days with no one using the water. So we asked that all the schools designate someone to flush these units first thing come Monday morning, so that there wasn't that lag over the weekend or over the summer. So hopefully the principals have responded to your letter, and they're taking some action in the schools this year. Again, we're open and ready to respond to any citizen complaints. If citizens don't feel they're getting a response from the water utility, come see one of us, and we'll see if we can put some heat on them.
And when does the committee meet?
We have a monthly meeting, I believe, scheduled for the third Thursday
Of each month?
Of each
in
month,
the
right.
municipal building, and that normally is at 8 o'clock?
at 8 o'clock, correct.
And it's open to the public?
Open to the public, definitely.
Okay, good. Well, I hope that anyone who has any questions about our water system or concerns will take advantage of the opportunity to attend a meeting of the Water Policy Advisory Committee, or even if you just want to know what's going on with water in East Brunswick, it's a good place to find out. I want to thank all three of you for being with me. We've covered a lot of ground. We could probably go on for much longer about our water system, because I know it's something you've all worked very hard on, and it's very complicated. But I hope that we've covered those things that are of most interest to people, and I appreciate your help with that.